Thank you for choosing the beautiful 12 by 14 Yardistry Gazebo. We are confident you'll find the assembly process straightforward as long as you work through each step in the assembly manual. In addition, this Helpful Hints video offers tips and tricks we've learned along the way for handling some of the more critical steps.
Step 1. Inventory. Before beginning assembly, sort your inventory by laying out each of the wood parts and hardware on the ground. Then, using the stamps or marked reference numbers, take a few minutes to cross-reference each part with the list in the assembly manual. Remember, we're always here to help. Contact us if you find a part that is damaged or missing. Take a moment to record the carton ID stamp for each box that you receive. There is a space on the top page in your instruction manual to write down the first 5 digits that come before 14459 and also the letter at the end. Post assemblies. When attaching the post mounts to the bottom of the post assemblies, keep the bolts loose before installing the pan screws on the inside of the post. It is okay to fasten the screws on the inside of the post at an angle. Once the pan screws are secure, go back and tighten the bolts. When the post assemblies are complete, you will have 2 right posts and 2 left posts.
Beam assembly. On a flat, solid, and raised surface, place a beam center long with the cutouts facing up. If you haven't already installed the T-nuts as shown in your instruction manual, do that now. The side with the T-nuts should be facing down. Next, place a beam end long, with the cutouts facing down on one end of the beam. The cutouts should sit tight together and the sides should be flush. Loosely install the hex bolts, then have someone look down the beam to ensure it is straight. Once the beam and the beam ends are straight, tighten the hex bolts. Repeat this for the other side and follow these tips to complete the short beam assemblies. Truss assembly. When completing your truss assemblies, it is important to make sure that the arched truss assembly sits flush to both sides and the top of each connector. The bolts should go through the connector first, then attach the arched truss assembly as shown in your manual. The difference between the long and short truss assemblies are the connectors. The long truss assembly uses the long beam connector, whereas the short beam assembly uses the short beam connector. When all truss assemblies have been completed, you should have 2 short truss assemblies and 2 long truss assemblies. Frame assembly. This part of the assembly is best completed on a flat, solid, and raised surface. To create the long side of the frame assembly, place 1 right post and 1 left post with the cutouts facing up and outwards. With an adult helper, lift a long beam assembly with the cutouts facing down so that the ends are flush to the cutout and top of each post. Make sure that pilot holes in the long beam assembly are along the bottom of the beam before you continue. Loosely attach the beam to each post with a hex bolt in the bottom hole. Leave the top hole open for now. It will be used later in the assembly. Using 2 adult helpers, carefully lift the assembly up and over so that it is laying flat with the side beam closest to the ground. Turn the assembly so that the beam is towards the top and each post can rest on a flat, solid, and raised surface, like this. Make sure the beam is square to the posts before continuing. With a helper, place a long truss assembly so that it fits tight to the bottom of the beam and tight to each post assembly. Make sure the open side of the connector in the truss is facing up. Align the holes in the truss to the holes in the bottom of the beam assembly, then attach with lag screws. It is important to make sure that all the holes align in the truss and the beam before you install the lag screws. If the holes do not align at first, double check that the beam and posts are square and that you are using the correct truss assembly. You may need to make slight adjustments to the post or beam in order to get the holes to align. If the beam and posts are square and you find that a hole is still not aligning, use the hole in the truss as your guide and draw a line on the beam from top to bottom and side to side with a pencil. Pull back the truss and pre-drill a small hole in the beam at the point where the two lines you just made meet. Put the truss back in place. Double check all holes still align, then attach with leg screws. When attaching the connector to the beam, make sure you use black pan screws. Before attaching the truss assembly to the posts, make sure that the truss assembly sits flush to the front edge of the post. Have a helper hold it in place. Pre-drill, then attach the leg screws, starting at the bottom and working your way up towards the beam. Repeat this for the other side. Once all the leg screws are installed, double check that your assembly is square, then pre-drill and attach a leg screw in the top hole on each side of the beam. Finally, tighten all bolts. To create a short side of the frame assembly, place a short beam assembly on a flat, solid, and raised surface, with the cutouts and T-nuts facing up. Make sure the pilot holes in the short beam assembly are towards the bottom of the beam. With a helper, bring in a short truss assembly so that the open side of the connector is facing up, and align the holes in the truss with the holes in the bottom of the beam. With someone holding the truss assembly tight to the bottom of the beam, measure from the end of the truss assembly to the end of the beam and check to make sure it is at least 6 inches. Repeat for the other side. You may need to adjust the truss slightly to ensure that there is at least 6 inches on each side. If the holes in the truss do not align with the holes in the beam, make sure you are using the correct truss assembly. Double check that there is at least 6 inches from the end of the truss assembly to the end of the beam. If the holes still don't align, use the hole in the truss as your guide and draw a line on the beam from top to bottom and side to side with a pencil. Pull back the truss and pre-drill a small hole in the beam at the point where the two lines you just made meet. Put the truss back in place. Double check all holes are aligned, then attach with leg screws as shown in your instruction manual. When attaching the connector to the beam, make sure you use black pan screws. You will need 4 people and 2 ladders for the next part of the assembly. Move the long beam assemblies to the final location of your structure, ensuring that one person holds each post assembly in place until the frame assembly is complete. With the grooves facing inwards, have 2 people lift a short beam assembly into place. Make sure the end of the beam sits tight and the top and bottom are flush to the long beam assembly. Attach with a hex bolt in the top hole in each end of the beam. Leave the bottom hole open for now. It will be used later in the assembly. Repeat for the second short beam assembly. Make sure the short beam assembly is square to the post, then have a helper hold the truss so that it is flush to the outside edge of each post. Pre-drill, then attach the leg screws, starting at the bottom and working your way up towards the beam. Repeat for the short beam assembly. Before continuing, check to make sure that your assembly is square. You can reference the dimensions on page 23 of your instruction manual. You may need to slightly adjust the posts to meet the desired measurements. Once the unit is square, pre-drill, then install a leg screw in the bottom hole on each end of the short beam assembly. Double check that the holes in the short truss assembly still align with the pilot holes in the bottom of the short beam assembly, then attach with leg screws. Place a post to rafter connector so that the flanges are facing up and angled downwards. Make sure that the bottom of the bracket is flush with the bottom of the beam, then attach with black pan screws. Roof assembly. Use a flat, solid, and raised surface when assembling the roof panels. It's important that all of the corners are flush, so get some assistance holding the ends of the rafter corner left, rafter corner right, and rafter in place. When they are aligned, attach with wood screws. It is also crucial to get the positioning of the fascia beam assembly right.
If the ends don't align properly, try rotating the fascia beam assembly. Once you get the ends to fit properly against the rafter corner left and rafter corner right, attach with wood screws. When you're attaching the end of the rafter to the fascia beam assembly, make sure it's centered over the 2 pilot holes on the fascia beam assembly. If the end of the strap or strap short isn't flush with the end of the rafter corner left or right, have someone hold the boards in position, then fasten with wood screws. When you're attaching the rafter short right or left, fasten it at the bottom first, where it connects to the fascia beam assembly. Then fasten it at the top of the rafter corner right or left. Flip one of the small roof rafter assemblies over and measure 1.5 inches up from the fascia beam assembly and make a mark. Place a roof to beam bracket so that it is centered on the rafter and the bottom of the bracket aligns with the mark, then attach with pan screws. It's essential to work on a flat and solid raised surface for this part of the assembly. Use a flat edge to check the alignment of the fascia beam assembly. If there's a gap like this, flip the beam over. In the correct position, the top of the fascia beam is level with the top of the rafter. Check to make sure there is a distance of 22 3/4 inches between the rafters before attaching the fascia beam. Make sure each corner is flush when you install the rafter corner left and right. Get someone to hold the boards in place, then attach with wood screws. Next, position the strap short large roof in the notches of the rafter corner right, rafter corner left, and the 2 rafters. Make sure that the ends don't overhang, then attach with wood screws. Now, move the strap left large roof and strap right large roof into place so that they fit into the notches of the rafter corner left and right and the 2 rafters. Don't attach them yet. First, position the rafter short right so that it fits into the grooves under the strap right large roof. When it is snug, attach one end of the rafter short right to the large fascia beam assembly. Then attach the other end of the rafter corner right. Repeat to position a rafter short left into the grooves under the strap left large roof. Attach it in the same manner, first to the large fascia beam assembly and then to the rafter corner left. Next, fasten the strap left large roof and strap right large roof. Get some help to ensure the ends don't overhang the edges of the rafter corners, then attach with wood screws. To complete the step, use wood screws in the remaining holes to attach the straps to the rafters. Turn the large roof rafter assembly over and position a strap brace over the ends of the strap left large roof and strap right large roof between the rafters. Make sure the edges are flush, then attach with wood screws. Next, measure 1.5 inches up from the fascia beam assembly and make a mark. Place a roof to beam bracket so that it is centered on the rafter and the bottom of the bracket aligns with the mark, then attach with pan screws. Gloves are essential for this part of the assembly because roofing materials can have sharp edges. To prevent scuffing, remove the clear and blue protective film from both sides of each aluminum part just before you use it. If you're using a power tool, take care not to over tighten the roofing screws as that can damage the roof panels. We recommend hand tightening the roofing screws until they are snug. Continue on a flat, solid, and raised surface and position a long panel right onto the small roof rafter assembly so that it's flush to the side of the rafter corner right. The holes on the rib should be centered on the rafter and the panel should overhang slightly at the bottom edge of the fascia beam assembly. Now, move the long panel left into place. One rib should overlap one rib on the long panel right. Make sure the other side is flush to the rafter corner left. And once again, the bottom edge will overhang slightly. When the panels are aligned, attach them with 4 roofing screws in the locations shown here on page 35 in your manual. Take care not to over-tighten the roofing screws. Place a right short panel onto the roof rafter assembly so that a rib overlaps the long panel right. It should be flush to the edge of the rafter corner right and overhang slightly at the bottom. Repeat to install the left short panel. It's okay if the panel edges aren't quite flush with the rafter corner left or right. Just make sure they don't overhang. If they do, loosen the roofing screws at the top of the assembly, then remove the other three. Adjust the roof panels so that they are aligned correctly, then replace the roofing screws and tighten. Get some assistance to position a roof edge left and roof edge right along the bottom of each small roof panel assembly. Make sure the ends meet tight in the center and the other end sits flush to the outer end of the fascia beam assembly. Then attach with roofing screws. Peel away a small portion of the backing on a strip of weather seal. Then begin attaching it to the rounded bottom of a ridge cap. Next, measure 2 3/4 inches from the bottom of a rafter corner right and rafter corner left and make a mark. Place the ridge clip so that one end is flush to the top of the assembly and the bottom of the ridge clip aligns with the mark. As long as one end is flush to the top, the other end will not overhang. Take care not to push down on the ridge clip. Attach with screws, then repeat for the other side. It is important to do the next part of the assembly on a flat, solid, and raised surface. Place a middle panel onto a large roof rafter assembly. Make sure the holes at the side of the panel are over the rafter. In the correct position, there will be a slight overhang at the top and a large overhang at the bottom of the panel. Now, place a long panel right on the assembly, followed by a long panel left. They should be flush to the edges of the rafter corner left and right and overhang the fascia beam assembly on the bottom. When the panels are aligned, attach with 4 roofing screws in the locations shown here and on page 38 in your manual. Repeat to install a short panel left and right on the assembly. It's alright if the panels aren't perfectly flush with the edges of the rafter corner right or left. Just make sure they don't overhang. If they do, loosen the roofing screws at the top of the assembly and remove the other 3. Then adjust all of the roof panels. When they are aligned correctly, replace the roofing screws and tighten. On one of the large roof panel assemblies, place a spacer top so that it is centered on the top and flush to the outside edges and attach with wood screws. When you're attaching the roof edge left and roof edge right at the bottom of a large roof panel assembly, make sure the curved finished edge is the one over top of the roof panels. Attach with roofing screws. Peel away a small portion of the backing strip of weather seal, then begin attaching it to the rounded bottom of the ridge clip. Next, measure 2 3/4 inches from the bottom of a rafter corner right and rafter corner left and make a mark. Place the ridge clip so that one end is flush to the top of the assembly and the bottom of the ridge clip aligns with the mark. As long as one end is flush to the top, the other end will not overhang. Take care not to push down on the ridge clip. Attach with screws, then repeat for the other side.
Attaching roof panels. Do not attempt this part of the assembly in windy conditions. You'll need 4 people and 3 ladders for this part of the assembly. Assign 1 person to remain in the middle throughout the roof assembly to support the roof panels. Have 2 people lift a large roof panel assembly over a long beam assembly. Be careful not to scratch the roof panels or scuff the beam with the roof to beam brackets. Make sure that the rafter corners sit into the post to rafter connector at each post. Next, lift a small roof panel assembly, the one with the roof to beam brackets installed, over a short beam assembly so that it fits snugly against the panel already in place. The rafter corners should sit into the rafter to post connectors against the rafter corners on the previously installed panel. When the edges of the 2 roof panel assemblies align, connect them with hex bolts. If you're having trouble getting the corners or the bolt holes to line up, have the person in the center push up on one or more of the panels to find the right fit. Install the remaining large roof panel assembly. Adjust the 3 panels as needed. In the correct position, the top edges of the 3 panels form a square. Peak loop.
To make it easier to install the peak loop, place a piece of tape over the nut. That way it doesn't fall out during installation.
Lift the last small roof panel, the one with no roof to beam brackets, into place over the short beam assembly. Get someone to push up on the peak loop so that the top of the panel slides under the edge of the peak cap. It may take some effort to get the 4th panel in place. Have the person in the center push up on one or more of the roof panel assemblies to achieve the right alignment. If the last small roof panel still doesn't fit, try the following. Check to make sure it does not have the roof to beam brackets installed. If they are installed, remove them. Try loosening all 6 other hex bolts installed during the roof panel assembly. That may allow for more room to adjust the panels. Refer back to your manual. To make sure that all the parts of the roof rafter assemblies are flush and that the roof panels don't overhang the rafter corners right and left. Once the panel assemblies are aligned and the corners are flush, tighten all bolts. With some assistance to lift the roof panel, insert roof to beam brackets under the last small roof panel installed. The roof to beam brackets should be centered on the rafter and tight to the inside of the beam, then attach with pan screws.
When the roof assembly is in place, attach it with 2 screws at the end of each fascia beam. For better access, loosen the roofing screw on the roof edge before inserting the screw into the fascia beam assembly. Remember to remove the plastic film from both sides of a ridge cap before you're ready to install it. If the ridge cap doesn't slide in smoothly, add a few drops of liquid soap on the inside of the cap before reinstalling.
If the ridge cap still won't go on, or an obstacle is blocking it, try bending up the side of the ridge cap. Hook one side of the ridge cap over the ridge clip. Then push down on the other side until it catches. Once on the clip, bend the cap back in place under the ridge clip. Slide the ridge cap up and have someone push up on the peak cap long so the ridge cap can slide underneath it.
Place a tie wrap bracket tight to one end of a tie so that the ends fit together nicely. Attach the tie wrap bracket with 1 pan screw through the hole closer to the middle of the tie. Now get a helper to hold the tie in place against the rafters so that it is level. Attach the tie to both sides of each rafter with the appropriate hardware. Pre-drill through the other hole on the bottom edge of the tie wrap bracket and attach it with a pan screw.